Gracia Espinosa, and welcome to a new episode of the Red Couch Podcast Summer Edition. Hannah Theodore.
Hello. Welcome back to me. Thank you for having me again on the show.
Yeah. So today we are going to talk one of the most interesting topics that we have in our media and with other classmates, say colleagues, and it's about the AI, artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Intelligence. And we are going to talk about the benefits, if we are afraid.
Concerns.
So
yeah, we've seen a lot of it over the past year. The growth has been rapid. I think, especially in the last year, we've started to see a lot more.
After the pandemic?
Yeah, after the pandemic, a lot of new software being developed and being made accessible, right, to more and more people. I think that's the other piece, right? That now anyone can access these tools and use them. And what does that mean for education, which is something we've seen a lot of here in the college, and especially in our fields of journalism as well, and the issue of truth and facts. So really good conversation. I think it's a good time to be having it also. So
yeah, because my first question, how do you perceive AI's role in our daily lives? And how do you think it might evolve?
I mean, this is the part that's so exciting and concerning depending on like who you're talking to and like how much they love the potential of AI, right?
For example, you in your routine, do you use an AI?
On a daily basis, I personally don't use tools like ChatGPT. I think we're seeing now the implementation of AI among our everyday apps that we use, right? Like Facebook is trying to incorporate it into its search tools. Google's trying to incorporate it. There's a push, I think, from certain social media companies to make AI part of the daily routine.
And you cannot avoid it. That's
you
the
really
point.
Can't. That's the thing. And so I've not sort of like made an active effort to resist it. But I just haven't felt the need to use it personally in my line of work. I know that there are some very practical and like inoffensive ways that journalists can use AI. And I learned a bunch about this at a conference I attended in the winter. There are certain ways, especially for text-based AI, right? We can use it to help us with suggestions for our writing. One of the most tedious jobs that I have is writing social media posts. It's not my favorite thing to do. I don't like writing social media posts. I much prefer writing like longer form articles and actually getting to, I hate the language that you have to use to talk on social media. That might be something where you could defer to AI, right?
So for example, for you, it helps to create the post on Instagram, Twitter.
I'll sometimes say like, write a Twitter post about this article. I won't give it the whole article. I'll sometimes give it like the gist of like what the article is about. I'll say this is the article's headline, and I might say use hashtags or things like that, right? I think it's kind of built into its knowledge to do that anyway. And then, and I might even say, give me 10 options, right? And that way I have things to choose from and I can use bits and pieces of things I like, from different options that it gives me. Mind you, if I was going to write an actual article, I would likely not defer any of that to AI.
But I just
don't trust it.
Well, with your perspective, I think it's in your case a good idea to use I don't know if it's ChatGPT, but to use AI, for example, to write how I can share this article on social media, because in our case we are not community managers,
right?
And we don't have a community manager, so it helps to improve or to raise the number of viewers in our social media without knowledge in our case.
For sure. And this is the thing too, right? I think in the current job landscape as well of like communications jobs and journalism jobs, we're being asked to do the role of sort of several different positions, right? And so part of that now, any job in media, no matter what it is, there's like sort of this expectation that you know how to structure posts for social media, or that you have some knowledge of social media. search engine optimization, things like that, right? Which all of that stuff is valuable, but at the end of the day, I'm a writer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so this is not necessarily what I trained for or what I feel I have the strongest expertise in. And whereas in something like that, where you're sort of feeding the machine information that you've already constructed, things that you already know to be true, and then you're just asking it to sort of churn out text that is based on that information, rather than asking it specific questions or expecting it to come back with facts, right? There are still huge knowledge gaps, right?
Of course, it's not still the last version of ChatGPT or the last version of AI that we have right now. I mean, it has to evolve.
Yes, yeah. Well, and you know what's interesting? You know what's interesting is, this is something I learned about the text-based AI, especially ChatGPT. I think there's we talk about fear, and we talk about the concerns that come from these intelligence tools getting smarter, quote unquote. And it's kind of a misconception, and this was sort of relieving to me, kind of, and also just as equally as concerning. It's not there's a word for it, where like it's gathering knowledge as it's being fed.
No.
Basically, like for ChatGPT.
Oh, to train.
Yeah. So the training models that are used to build ChatGPT's knowledge base is still inputted manually, right? This is still, like, right now, the knowledge that ChatGPT has is based on its most recent update, which might have been several months or even some years ago now. That's why one, you don't want to trust a text-based AI service to give you factual information all the time, because it might not be up to date, and it's actually not learning as it goes, which is something that I think people maybe borrow from science fiction, right? It's not yet. There are training models that exist like that, but like something like ChatGPT, for example, all of its knowledge is manually inputted every few months or so.
You are talking about that Meta, the company with Instagram and Facebook. After June 26th, is going to use all the information. I mean, AI is going to compile all the information that me or Hannah as users we provide to the social media. It's the only way that right now AI has to be better. So that's why you have to think what information you are going to provide to the social media, because in the future, perhaps when you passed away, they can use pictures or information that you uploaded on social media, and they can use it for for ads, or to create illustrations for a company. So it's a very sensitive.
For sure. And there are layers to this too. So yes, anything that is like publicly put on the internet is sort of seen, unless the website to which you're posting gives you some kind of opt-out option, right? If you can say, no, I don't want the content that I share to be made accessible to AI training models. A lot of sites don't even disclose whether or not they're doing that. And it should be an opt-in model, right? Not an opt-out. Don't say that I have to do it and then make me tell you, no, actually, I don't want to. They'll just assume that you're going to do it unless you tell them otherwise. The other piece of this that is concerning, and I learned this when I was at this panel, right now it's beneficial for sort of multiple AI companies to share information in order to develop all of their training models. So I might say, I'm okay with the content that I'm sharing on this platform to be used to develop the AI for that platform, but that AI platform is under no obligation to disclose whether or not they're also sharing that information with other AI training models, right? So
also, they don't share.
They could. They
Okay.
could share and they would not be obligated to disclose whether or not they're sharing.
Okay, because for me, ChatGPT or Gemini, the artificial intelligence of Google are different, but they could share the
Feasibly, they
information.
could share. It depends if it's in their best interest, right?
Oh.
If there's some kind of competition where it's like one is trying to maybe advance faster than the other, but if there's money involved,
Yeah.
right? If it's a matter of sort of selling data, which obviously we already know that happens, if there's a question there of like sharing information, and also something like ChatGPT and other AI websites they're aggregates, right, of several different AI machines that are being sort of brought together in one space. So everything's working in tandem at the end of the day. And there's very little regulation. That's the part that scares me, is that the evolution is happening a lot faster than our legislators are able to keep up with, right? I don't know if you've ever seen like a Senate hearing with Facebook or something. It's like these are like old people who do not understand what they're talking about. And so the technology and the social media spaces continue to evolve, and no one knows how to control them because they don't know how they work.
And Hannah, I have a question because related to the copyright and provide your personal information. Still, you have to give your permission. But for example, an artist, right now there are a lot of people who are creating songs and music with the voices of Taylor Swift,
Yeah.
Bad Bunny. So what kind of copyright they are going to have if you create the uh, a piece of music or a song from your house? For me, it's complicated. The last controversial news that I know about this, it was related to Bad Bunny. Bad Bunny was very upset because his last album was not so successful. And the only song that it was trendy on TikTok was created by AI. And, people didn't go to his concert,
Right.
but they decided to use this AI song with his voice, to create videos on TikTok. So
Yeah, I find that very strange. Like, this is the other thing that freaks me out with like, there's a sort of disregard, I think, for like the creative implications about AI with the younger generation who has kind of only known a world with artificial intelligence. And that concerns me, right? There's a sort of lack of that they just don't really care, right? Like if I'm sharing, say I'm sharing like poetry that I wrote online and I post it to some kind of, public forum, and then I find out that that has been co-opted in order to train an AI model, or it's being, it's being used to create some kind of character AI, right? Which is another big thing, right? Things like that, and artwork too. If I'm an artist and I want to share my art publicly, and then I see sort of just a sense of like, they seem very flippant about it, these kids. They'll be like, well, what's the big deal? You shared it online, so it's public. It's like, yes, that's true. I did share it, and same with music artists, right? Like big time music artists that are sharing their music. They're a little more copyright protected, right? Because that is their art and they're selling it for money. But
if you
yeah.
if you create a song with the voice of a famous singer right now, it still hears like robotic. It doesn't look like the real singer.
For sure. That's the thing. But this is what I don't get is like they don't seem to care, which is the part I don't understand. Like I heard like an AI cover of a Taylor Swift song from her new album, and they had changed it so the voice sounded more like Lana Del Rey. And all the comments were like, "Oh my gosh, I like this so much better. Oh, this is so much better than the original." What are you talking about? It's a robot. How is it better? Like, it's just, I don't understand. Or they'll be like, oh, I wish I could download this version. I wish I could listen to this. It's like, you should not want that. Like,
I understand why you are upset, because in this case, Taylor Swift not only sings, she writes the lyrics.
Yeah, for sure. Like,
it's not like Bad Bunny, for example.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm sorry if I make a mistake, but I think Bad Bunny doesn't create the lyrics of his own songs because he can help.
Yeah.
But he is not the main creator. I mean, the main author of his lyrics.
Yeah, that could definitely be a piece too. I think there's like this is the thing is like I think a lot of the concerns related to AI are sort of like these gut feelings, you know, which can be hard to articulate to folks that have come up using artificial intelligence and don't fully understand why it might make creatives uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Um, and so you can just kind of you say to them like, well, I just don't know. Like, I think it just makes me feel kind of icky, you know? And sometimes there's nothing else to it than that, right? Like, I fundamentally feel strange about the idea of a artificial machine creating artwork because it feels soulless, and I think art is a human creation, right? And so then you're just running into like fundamental
So now,
differences,
with this
right?
current situation, I want to know.
Mhm.
We need ethical considerations
Yeah.
with AI, but how we are going to do it if AI is faster than the rules or the norms of
Yeah.
a government of a
That's
country?
that's the hardest part, right? Is I think that I don't think the regulators are going to catch up with
It's
how fast
impossible.
it's like evolving way too quickly. I think at the end of the day, it has to come down to what are private organizations going to do to either regulate it or at least make their workers aware of it. The Western Gazette did an amazing piece of research journalism this past year where they looked at every syllabus for, or sorry, several different syllabi across various programs at Western to try to find out um, which programs were implementing into their syllabi um, regulations surrounding AI. Were there certain programs that didn't care, who didn't even mention AI? And which were the programs that were maybe more likely to include a note about AI in their syllabi? And so it kind of revealed, like, you know, about what you'd expect. Like the arts and humanities were maybe a little more, um, you know, strict about saying, you know, don't use AI or whatever. And you know, the program that I studied in, which was a very media critical program, they had very strict rules about AI as well. Because, dude, I was in that program 12 years ago, almost 12 years ago now is when I started. We were talking about AI back then in that program. So like there have been fears amongst folks that sort of understood how rapidly the
Yeah.
space was evolving, and then now we're seeing exactly what happens with tech generally is this sort of like rapid growth, and then it increases so exponentially that eventually you reach this point where you can't tell the difference anymore between if we're evolving or if we've just reached the point of no return, basically.
And Hannah, as an editor of the Environment, have you noticed significant change in journalism due to AI-driven tools or technologies?
I think I've noticed a change in how journalists are being trained. You know, this was something that came up at that panel too, was like, how do we work into like training for journalists now, how to recognize when something is generated by AI? Because this is a big piece, right? A lot of these artificially generated images um, are oftentimes created as tools of deception, right? Either to trick you into thinking something is real when it's not, and they're getting very good at figuring out. Uh, you know, every time we make a list saying here's the things to watch out for, they've already updated the knowledge base and now they've adjusted for that, right? So before it was the hands. You always looked at the hands, right? If it had extra fingers or if something weird was going on with the hands. And now AI is getting much better at generating hands, right? Because they know now what needs to improve. So that's been a big piece, I think, in our field, is saying like, okay, what are the signs to look out for, and how do we properly spread accurate information in a world where it's getting very hard to distinguish?
Did you hear about this famous sports magazine with they they had articles, but most of the articles were created by AI,
Mm.
and
Oh, I did hear about this. Yeah.
to illustrate the articles they use, they created not only the articles, the pictures of the journalists to
Weird.
avoid, they
Yeah, yeah.
use the AI.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. And like if you weren't paying attention, then you probably wouldn't think anything of it, right? Like sometimes I read a text, like it's for me again, like with the text, it's becoming very obvious. If you don't like manipulate it somehow, you got it. Like, listen, here's one thing I have used ChatGPT for, and I'll be totally transparent about it.
The last version or the old one?
Probably it's been a while. It's been a few months since I've used it, but like some things really suck to write. Cover letters really suck to write. Letters of recommendation can be a bit of a struggle to write sometimes. And so sometimes, and this is one thing I find helpful with ChatGPT is like if you give it sort of the bullet notes of what you want, and then it turns out something, and you read it, and you're like, well, this obviously reads like AI, right? Just take that framework and then modify it, right? Give it more life, change out some words here and there, and like don't do this if you're writing an essay, right? But like if it's something that's sort of like a clinical piece of writing where it can at least give you the bones to get started and then you can piece together how you actually want it to sound, it's a great starting point, and I will give it that. The problem is that a lot of folks just aren't doing that, right? And it's especially concerning when these kids are doing it for their school essays and they're saying, write an essay about, you know, Romeo and Juliet. And then it's turning out a bunch of probably inaccurate information and just a bunch of words that they're recycling for every other person who asked for that, right?
I'm angry when I see job positions that I know that the person who posted that job position use the AI, and you can notice because it doesn't make sense, all the duties and the skills that that person demands for a journalist.
And like you're not even doing it.
And you don't want that I use the AI to create my cover letter.
No, I hate that too. It's so frustrating. And that's speak like on the topic of jobs too. It's like a lot of times your resume is being parsed through by AI now, right? If you're applying for a job online, there is no sort of like first round of you know, someone who's manually looking through your resume. You know, it'll just be like a machine that is sort of parsing through like, oh, this is what I'm looking for. Here's a keyword I want. Here's an experience I want. And then that's how you find out if you, and then the first email you get is also automated, you know, like it's just like, oh my God. So that kind of stuff, it is frustrating because then they want to hire you and make you do all this work. And it's like, what work did you do in the hiring process? You know what I mean?
It's true. But at the same time, I agree that when you write a cover letter with AI, it's obvious that you use
That's
AI.
the thing. You gotta play around with it, right? If it's gonna give you something, it's a good starting point. Don't leave it at that. You gotta fix it.
That's the problem. People copy and paste, but
that's the biggest problem.
I mean, as an idea to start,
yeah,
it's okay. I mean, you can use it. I mean, I'm not going to forbid the use of AI. The problem is when you copy and paste the same information.
And if you copy and paste and you don't check it, right? If you don't check it over for good sentence structure, accurate information, right? Because again, there's like a word for it. It's something weird, like ghosting or something, where it just makes up information. Oh yeah, this is the thing that the text-based AI will do, where they'll just like they'll just make something up. I'm so serious. This is like something they were explaining, that like if you see just like random inaccurate information, it's almost like it's piecing together bits and pieces of the question you've asked it, but it doesn't actually know the answer because it's not been built into its knowledge base yet. So it'll just lie. It won't say. It rarely will it say I don't know. It'll just give you some like lie.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really weird. So you gotta watch out. Like,
I
check
was
your
not
information.
afraid, but now I'm afraid.
Yeah, and isn't that such? I don't know if ghosting is what it's called, but it's something spooky like that. Like they make it sound so scary. But yeah, that's a real thing.
So I don't know if you personally experienced moments when AI tools significantly improved your workflow or productivity. Because we talk about the bad thing, but I would like to.
No, for sure. That's like, so yeah, if I feel like for like clinical pieces of writing, it has been helpful. Something that was also suggested to me as a helpful use of AI is to, if you struggle to write headlines, it's another tool for journalists. It can be really good for just like, if you say, here's what the article is about, You could even give it the whole article, right? Just copy paste the whole article and say, here's what the article is. Can you come up with, give me 10 headlines, right? And then let the machine give you a few options. And maybe you don't even use one of them. Maybe you use bits and pieces of several of them, right? I think in that way it can be helpful just to like you said, give you a few ideas. But in terms of like daily workflow, I'm just not at that point yet. I'm sure there are people who are implementing it better than me.
Experts. I mean, we are citizen normal.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah,
journalists.
but this is what I'm saying is like now it's at that point where it's becoming so accessible that like anyone could be an expert. It's just about, finding a good balance of how to use it personally and really making sure like you're not crossing boundaries that just make your work meaningless, You still got to go to work, guys, and you got to go to school.
Yeah,
Please,
obviously.
don't let them just take away. Listen, I am all for a world where no one has to work anymore, but the problem is that our society is not built up to support us if we don't have jobs. So unless that changes, then we really got to make sure that we, and in the creative field, right? If I don't have to do a work ever again, I got to at least be able to like write or make music or make art. Surely we need to at least keep that for ourselves. I think, and that's what I would. That's what I would say. Keep art out of it. Above anything else, just keep art out of it.
I don't know if you want to add something, Hannah, or
I feel like
thought?
that's like that's where I feel like good about leaving it there because that's like at the end of the day, just keep the art safe. We need that. That's the human thing.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I will see you in the next in our next episode.
Yes. Bye-bye.
So thank you for listening to another episode of the Red Couch podcast. You know that you can catch up with every episode on our website, in Terrobank, or wherever you get your podcasts, Google, Apple Podcasts, and watch full episode on YouTube. You can see these beautiful journalists and subscribe to our newsletter to keep up with fashion. For the Interrobank, I'm Gracia Espinosa.